And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. We have with us today a friend to the show, Dr. Nina Shapiro. You may have seen her on the show The Doctors, and she's actually appeared on many other programs. You're sort of the doctor's doctor, aren't you, Dr. Shapiro?
Well, thank you. I hope I am.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reputation that you have certainly in this town. But also, you're here to talk about your fourth book and also your other book, Hype, that's now out in paperback. But the fourth book is actually fascinating. It was a terrific read and it comes out in November, but we got a sneak peek. The Ultimate Kids Guide to Being Super Healthy. What a fabulous book because it's written for kids. But believe me, I think adults need to read this so they know how to understand and explain things to kids, right?
Right. I did write it for elementary school level kids.
Yeah.
So, really, kindergarten, if you're a reader or an early reader, up through fifth or sixth grade. But I think a lot of the information is going to be new for adults as well. So, I sort of say to the children at the beginning of the book, maybe you want to have your grown up read this with you. And I think a lot of the grown-ups will learn a lot about the science of what they're telling their kids to do every day that they don't necessarily even know the reason for either. So, go to sleep. You need a good night's sleep. Well, what happens? What's the science of sleep? How do you really know what's going on during the night? Why is that so important?
Right. Because you're right. Because a lot of times it's like, you got to go to bed. And it's like, that's like the worst thing you want to hear, right? It's like, why do I have to go to bed? And you explain that. And I'm going to have you explain it in a minute. Also about like brushing your teeth, all those things that kids hated. I'll give you a little clue with me. When I was really younger, I hated washing my hair. And I hated it because I had lots and lots of hair, and washing it was an ordeal. It was tangled. And finally, one day they said, you're going to get bees in there, and that was it. I ran to the shower and I
Oh, that's
washed my hair.
amazing.
But you don't want to put that in the book, right? You really want to explain to kids why it's important to be clean, why you need to do this. So let's have at it. Let's talk about sleep first, for example.
Right. So sleep. So most kids don't want to go to sleep. I mean, certainly some like it, but the younger ones really, it's to them, it's a waste of time. It's FOMO. So, fear of missing out. They feel like they're missing whatever the grown-ups or the older kids are doing, and it feels like they're doing nothing. It really feels like a waste of time. So, what happens during sleep? I explain that to kids and to grown-ups too, as far as sleep cycles, what it means to be in all the cycles of sleep. I explain what REM or rapid eye movement sleep is, what dream sleep is, why that's so important, and then what happens to their body. So your heart rate goes down, your breathing goes down, your brain is in a different plane. So it's enabling it to sort of think differently and process all the things that went on during the day. And another thing that's really important for kids, and kids like to hear this too, is that something called growth hormone, which makes them get big and tall and strong, is released more readily during the deeper stages of sleep. So if they don't
Hmm.
sleep enough, they may not have enough growth hormone to make them big and strong and tall. So some of the kids like to hear that as well. It's a small facet of sleep, but I think it's really a cool little fact that a lot of people don't know, that it's released more during restful sleep. And I also talk about what happens if they don't get a good night's sleep and how yucky they feel the next day. So they're cranky, they're irritable, they may have more fights with their friends, they may not do well in sports or in school. So I also talk about what are the negative things that happen if they don't get a good night's sleep and why it's so important for their day to have a really good night as well.
What about vaccines? I know that you talk about getting a shot because what kid likes to get a shot, right? Um, and also the COVID vaccine. How do you explain that to them?
So I think vaccines, shots in general, really we need to change the conversation for kids, not just for the COVID vaccine, but for shots in general. Shots are a punishment. And I don't give shots in my office because I don't do primary care. But I often hear from parents, to their children, if you don't behave in Dr. Shapiro's office, she's going to give you a shot.
Ew. Who would
And
say that to a kid? Oh
I
my
say
God,
it
that's
all the
terrible.
time. And I say, no, I'm not going to give you, I don't, if you don't behave, that's not my problem, but you're not going to get a shot. And a shot is not a punishment. And I think that really needs to be changed, that shots are necessary. They prevent a lot of really bad illnesses that most children and adults have never seen, have never read about in a book, have never seen a picture of. And I think we need to relearn for both kids and adults what we are preventing from giving all the shots that we give. Most children, by the time they're in elementary school, have had hundreds of shots that they don't even remember because they were infants when they got them.
Well,
yeah.
That's also something that I've been bringing up with some adult friends of mine. Gosh, do I even want to get into this? Who refused to get the COVID shot. And look, let's face it, this is a complicated issue. And if we didn't have the 24/7 news and social media talking about how we're being controlled or whatever, this probably wouldn't be as big of an issue, because most of us, right, have had the polio shot, measles, mumps, rubella, et cetera, et cetera. And we're alive because of it. And I just look at it that way, right? It's here to help save our lives. This is a pandemic, happens once every 100 years or so, and this is a great thing. But, you know, you also talk about that, right? That it really,
I mean, I think
is there.
The COVID vaccine has life-saving benefits, and it's the reason why people are not dying, even if they're getting a mild illness with COVID, is because of the vaccine. The problem is that we are living in this in real time. So every little news bite gets a bit of information, and everything gets skewed a little bit. So if somebody has a complication from the vaccine, and there are risks to every vaccine, it gets blown up in the media as this horrible thing, and the vaccine is terrible. And, you know, we're learning now that the vaccines don't necessarily last forever. They are not 100% effective. We knew that, but now that we're seeing quote unquote breakthrough infections, it's making the vaccines seem like they're not beneficial.
Doing their job. Yeah, but they are, in fact. And it's just about shelf life, which means thank goodness we could get a booster, right?
Right. Yeah. And if we need a fourth vaccine, we'll get it, but probably not. It probably will be a 3 vaccine series for everybody.
Interesting. Are you of the belief that if you got Pfizer, stick with Pfizer? If you got Moderna, stick with Moderna?
That's a great question, and that is still to be determined. So Pfizer and Moderna are very similar. They both are mRNA vaccines, which is not, you're not getting a gene, it's not affecting your chromosomes or your genetic material, but it is an mRNA-based vaccine. They're very similar. So if you get Moderna, Pfizer, or Pfizer, Moderna, or Moderna, all three, there's probably very little difference. We don't yet know, because the record keeping and the data on who's getting a third dose, and some people have had Johnson & Johnson and are then getting a second dose. So that is going to take another 6 to 12 months before we figure out what was the best, or even if there's a difference between any of the series of vaccines.
Let's go back to kids for a little bit. I know that you also talk about, and I love this one, cookies, right? And sugar. And what does sugar do to the body? How do you explain that to kids? Because I had such a sweet tooth. Like, I would consume any piece of cake, cookies, stuff like that. And you could have told me anything and I wouldn't care. So how do you sort of explain it to a kid so that they understand it intellectually, so that they will in fact do the right thing?
So I think, you know, one of the things is that we don't want to really just vilify sugar. You know, certainly it's not the best thing for you, but we have to acknowledge as adults and as kids, we like it. We like cookies. Cookies are great. They're not all bad for you. And I think if you just say sugar is bad and protein is good and that's it, and this is bad and good, then it's really only going to make them feel bad about doing something and not really understanding it. So what I try to do is just break it down. Here is the science of sugar. Here's what happens to your body when you eat sugar. Here's what it looks like. Here's what the molecule looks like. Here's how it affects your energy. Here's how long it lasts. And that's it. And then here's what happens if you eat protein. And here's what happens if you eat fat. And here are the different foods that are in different things. And here's what fiber does. And so without sort of making it good or bad, or really saying, you know, this is bad, you know, cookies are bad and you know, chicken is good, or anything like that, just to say, here's what it does to your body. Here's why you feel the way you feel after you have cookies. It's not necessarily all terrible.
Now, the book is made, again, for what ages?
5 to 11. So kinder through 5th or 6th.
But I have to be clear, I think it's a great read for teenagers and adults. I'm not sure if we have any of the illustrations from the book that my engineer has, but if we do, I'll put them up because it's also beautifully illustrated, right? It's age appropriate, and the illustrations really explain a lot along with the chapters and what we're reading. So I enjoyed that quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I have a great illustrator. So Nicole
Yeah.
Grimes, shout out to Nicole. She recently graduated from Loyola Marymount, animation major, and she is wonderful and really tries to express, a feeling that a kid would have, and very bright, colorful, a little bit funny. So the illustrations are absolutely a huge part of the book.
Very smart. Let's talk a little bit about you. Could you tell our audience about you and your practice and all that? You're quite an accomplished doctor, if you would.
Oh, sure. Thanks. So I'm Dr. Nina Shapiro. I am a pediatric otolaryngologist or ear, nose, and throat specialist at UCLA, David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. And within that, it's the Mattel Children's Hospital, UCLA. I've been in practice there for about 24 years. It's an academic practice, but I see all types of kids, healthy kids with ear infections or big tonsils, big adenoids, and also critically ill kids with airway problems, ICU issues, airway issues, emergency surgeries, things like that. I do research as well. I teach residents, give lectures, and for fun, I write books for non-medical audiences and speak about that. I also write for Forbes. I'm a Forbes contributor in their healthcare column. Also trying to decipher the daily news that we're hearing about in healthcare, and that's been quite overwhelming in the last 18 months or so.
Right, because let's do something called fact versus fiction. Now, I want to hold this book up because now it's out in paperback. I have the hardcover. This is the paperback. It's called Hype, easy to remember. A doctor's guide to medical myths, exaggerated claims, and bad advice. How to tell what's real and what's not. Therefore, Hype. Let's talk a little bit about that. Well, we did brush upon vaccines in the community, but for all that's out there, what would you like to say for those people who are convinced that something horrible will happen when they get the shot, that they've had an allergy when they got a flu shot, that there is 5G in the vaccine? Like, what would you say to these people to try and bring them to the other side for their own health, really?
So, I think, again, there's some crazy myths out there like the 5G and that, you're going to grow a third arm and things like that, and it's going to alter your genetic code. I think that a couple of basic things to understand about the vaccine that may make people feel a little bit better. It's a very simple vaccine in that it's not a piece of the virus that you're getting. A lot of people at the beginning were thinking that if they got the vaccine that they could shed COVID. And there were some businesses that were saying if you got vaccinated, you cannot come in because the vaccine that you got is going to make you have COVID and spread it. So that is absolutely not the case. The vaccine is actually released from your body, metabolized very quickly within a few days, and all that's left is that your body is making some proteins, and it is not from your nucleus and all this scary stuff about chromosomes. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that you are able to build antibodies. It's very simple. The technology is not new. It's been around for 30 or 40 years. It's just this very specific vaccine that they made, and it's amazing. They didn't rush it. That's a lot of people think that, oh, they did it too quickly. They actually had the funding and the time and the person power to do it in a relatively short period of time, but it was not rushed. No corners were cut. And people are seeing the outcomes of people who are not vaccinated and are dying. Our ICUs and morgues are filled with unvaccinated people.
Yeah. Now, what about some of the really sort of outrageous myths that we're hearing about? I believe I heard something about what it would do to one's testicles, right? Could you tell us about that,
yes,
please?
Oh, happy to. I love testicle talk. So Nicki Minaj was invited to the Met Gala, and I'm sure she would have had an amazing outfit. But one of the requirements for the guests was that they had to be vaccinated. And they also had to be masked, although I didn't see a whole lot of masks on the on the screens that I saw, but I think indoors they were masked and all
Yeah.
had to be vaccinated. She did not want to get a vaccine and posted something that went viral saying that I think it was her cousin's fiance had the vaccine. It made their testicles swell, and now he's infertile and the wedding is off. It's
Oh,
insanity. It's crazy. It is crazy.
oh.
So
Where did he get the idea that his testicles were swelling because of the vaccine? And wow, it wasn't much of a relationship in the first place if the wedding's off. What a bummer.
right. So viruses can make your testicles swell. So mumps is one of the biggies. So
Ah,
mumps can make your glands swell here, and they can also make your testicles swell. And that's a viral inflammation. So a lot of viruses can cause that. Something called orchitis, which is not that uncommon. Kids can get it, little kids can get it. They can get it from a cold virus. You don't get it from a vaccine, though. You can get it from COVID infection. COVID infection makes everything swell. It's an inflammatory virus, but you don't get it
right.
from the vaccine. It's nonsense.
I know people who have lupus and they were concerned about getting the vaccine. What do you say about that? Because, they have inflammation issues.
Right. So lupus is, it's an autoimmune disease, and so
Hmm.
oftentimes they are on immunosuppressants to sort of block their immune system from attacking their own self. And I think when it's something specific like that, rheumatoid arthritis is another one, leukemia, lymphoma, chronic illnesses, chronic Lyme disease. There are a lot of issues that I think are so specific and genuinely need individual consultation with their specialist. So
Mm.
there are some illnesses where the specialist may recommend that they hold off on the vaccine, or they may recommend, you know what, you may be better off with the Johnson and Johnson, or you may be better off with an mRNA vaccine, or what to do with their medications. They may recommend stopping some of their medications around the time of vaccination, but that's a very specific issue that should be discussed with their doctor. It should not be discussed with friends or Facebook groups that just have
Right.
this consensus statement that they look online and find these Google searches. That's a specific thing with their doctors.
Yeah. You talk in the book about gluten. Don't worry about the phone.
Sorry
You
about
talk
that.
a No, that's okay. We talk about gluten. I'll let it pass.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about in the book about gluten, gluten-free products. You also talk about GMOs, organic milk. What are your thoughts on all of that? I'm going to guess that it's valuable, especially if you think that it's helping you, right? I'm going to do a confession. When I have gluten-free bread, I feel like I don't blow up.
Yeah.
But if I have regular bread, I'm convinced that I just blow up from it immediately, or pasta or something that's got the gluten in it. Fact or fiction? What's the reality there?
So that's a mix. So it probably does make you a little bit bloated. It makes people bloated. That doesn't mean you have a gluten allergy or gluten intolerance. Gluten is a protein. It's not a carbohydrate. And it can alter your digestion a little bit. And some people are a little bit more sensitive to it. So if you feel physically better eating gluten-free food, then by all means do it. Just understand that a lot of the gluten-free products, the reason why they taste so good, and I've had a lot of these pastas and they're good.
They do.
Aren't they? Yeah. They add extra good stuff to make it taste good. Sometimes they add extra oil. So that's why, some of these pastas, the gluten-free pastas, are a bit dense. So you have to sort of look at the other side of things. A lot of people who don't eat gluten end up substituting gluten. They have a lot of rice products.
Right.
So, rice is a carbohydrate. And, it's certainly not bad for you, but too much rice can cause, some other issues, because basically after you chew rice, it turns into sugar. So, you just have to be careful if you think that being gluten-free gives you license to eat any other sort of carbohydrate gluten-free product. You still have to be careful and moderate that.
Organic. I can't see the downside to that, but what do you have to say about it?
So that's also, if something has a peel, like an orange or a banana, it doesn't matter if it's organic or conventionally grown, because, the concern is that if it's not organic and a pesticide gets into the actual product, it, can have some detriments, which is also, very sort of, it depends on the farm and which pesticide is used. But, is it really worth the extra money? For some products, it might be. So berries, for instance, it's probably better to get organic if you can.
Right.
That said, it's 2 or 3 times the price often, and oftentimes people can't afford that. The other thing
Right.
I want to mention as far as fruits and vegetables is that many frozen fruits and vegetables are just as healthy and just as good for you and have just as many nutrients as the fresh stuff. So if you cannot afford, the $9 carton of raspberries with 5 raspberries in them, get a big bag of frozen raspberries, and they're just as good for you and a lot cheaper.
That is a great tip. I've used those before. I'll put them in a smoothie, but you're saying, they're just as good to eat, in a little dish, right? With
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you want to sprinkle a little sugar on it. But in other words, just thaw it out a little bit. And that's a great tip, because I was never sure about that one. That's a good one. Thank you for adding that. That's very smart. Fish, should we be having it? Because then you read about farm grown fish, farm harvested fish, and wild fish. What's up? Should we be having it or so much or not?
So, one of the concerns about fish is mercury in fish.
Right.
So
Certainly tuna, right? And I'm a tuna person. And when I would read about that, I'd be like, oh, the one thing I like is a can of tuna. Now I can't have that. So talk to me about the mercury.
You have to have a lot of cans of tuna.
Okay.
To have you have to eat a tuna fish, which is, like a 300-pound tuna to,
right.
Have mercury toxicity. So, and I know this is a very boring thing to say, but this is what I say over and over in Hype, is that everything in moderation is reasonable. And, if you have fish, 3 meals a day plus snacks, which most humans don't,
right.
If you have fish a few times per week, you're fine. You're fine.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about superfoods and aging gracefully. Is there a cocktail for aging gracefully other than all those folks who are getting injections everywhere and pulled up? And God bless them for doing that. I don't have the nerve, but for those, all of us want to age gracefully. What should we be putting in our bodies that's considered a superfood that would be beneficial?
So I hate to say it, there is no such thing as a superfood. There are a lot of foods that are really good for you, super good for you, but there's no magic bullet, there's no magic pill, there's no magic berry. So, aging is all about eating well, eating whole foods. And by that, I mean eating the actual food as opposed to a supplement or a product that contains the foods. I'm not a big proponent of smoothies, because what happens with the I know you mentioned that they're really good, but the problem with the smoothies or any sort of blended drinks is it takes out the fiber in the food and condenses the sugar, even in some vegetables. So, you can take a 2 pounds of kale and smooth it down to a half a cup. And you certainly don't need 2 pounds of kale. And the benefit of kale primarily is actually the fiber. So, balanced diet. And I think for aging these days, what we're talking a lot about is the aging brain. And we can't see our brains necessarily, but that's really important as far as keeping active. We always talk about physical activity, and it's important to keep exercising and, going out for walks or bike rides or whatever you can do to be outside and be active. But you have to keep your brain active, even as you get into, the older decades of your life, whether it's working or learning something new or challenging yourself or being involved in clubs or learning a new skill that you wouldn't have even considered learning. That actually is one of the best ways to age gracefully. If you want a little Botox on top, that's fine too.
I'm a couple of years north of 40, and I find that lately I'm forgetting stuff, right? I think when we were off the air, I said to you, gosh, I'm terrible at memorizing. I have to confess, I've always been sort of not great at memorizing stuff, even like in high school, but I think it's kind of like getting worse. So is there anything you can do otherwise just keeping yourself active, as you said? But is there a supplement to take? There's all these supplements, right? That people are claiming this is it. You wouldn't believe it. I could memorize everything now, and I couldn't. What do you do?
No, no,
No. Oh,
I don't think so. I
okay.
think, what I can't wait to turn 40. No. So, what I do, because I have I have two kids, and, I have a job and a husband, a lot going on. I write everything down and I just, I have Post-its all over the place, and, whatever way I can remember something, and I don't rely just on my aging brain to do that. One of the smartest doctors that I knew as an intern. So intern is like your first year of being a doctor. She said, here are the 3 rules of internship. And this was actually 3 rules that I carry through, and also for things like aging. Do it yourself, do it now, and write it down.
Got it.
That's all
perfect.
you need to do. Because if you say, I'm going to remember that later, I'm going to write it down later, it's done. It's gone.
Gosh, doctor, so much common sense, and you break it down for us, and you're so trustworthy. Whatever you say, it's like,
don't believe
okay,
a word
I'll do
I
it.
say. It's all hype.
No, honestly, and I love this. Please, everybody, it is all hype. So get the book, Hype. I love this book. Now that it's out in paperback, it's sort of an easy look through. You make it easy. I mean, I've sort of got my favorite chapters in here. I mean, I could talk to you forever. We talk about fat-free. This one I like, the fat-free sugar, the organic cookies. All right, I have like a few seconds for that. What are your thoughts on it? Better off not going the fat-free, right? I mean, we've been reading about that for a couple of years, but what's your thoughts?
No, I mean, first of all, if you're going to enjoy something like a cookie, make it good, I think.
Yeah.
Get the good
Yeah.
stuff. And, it's all marketing. It's all marketing. So if they take out the sugar in a cookie, they're going to add other stuff to make it appealing. And that was, a big push in the 70s when everything became low fat, low calorie, sugar free. They were adding other things to make it taste good, and it wasn't necessarily better for us or lower calorie or healthier. So, if you're going to eat something enjoyable, such as a cookie or a dessert, or, it's just like, for wine, drink the good stuff first, right?
Yeah, gosh, you are such a wealth of information. I could keep you on all afternoon, but we can't. Please, everybody, pick up the book Hype and pre-order the Ultimate Kids Guide to Being Super Healthy. Absolutely fantastic, fantastic book. And remember, this isn't just for kids. I think this book should also be in schools, if we can get this in schools. It's such a great and fun way to explain to kids, like, oh, that's why my mom's asking me to go to sleep now, or explaining why it's important. They have it right there in front of them as a guide. So thank you for that. Any parting words you'd like to tell our audience?
I think it's all about balance. It's all about, no extreme. There is no magic diet. There is no best exercise. There is no pill. There is nothing that is sort of the secret answer. We're all hoping that there would be. I think the only secret to our health right now is a COVID vaccine, so we can get back to some semblance of life as we knew it. Aside from getting your COVID vaccine, and if we were taping this 2 days ago, I would have said vote. I think that it's just all about balance in your life. And I know that sounds boring, and I know it sounds like there's no sort of magic answer to it, but that really is the answer to staying healthy. And learn something new, because that'll help your brain.
Yeah, mine is to try to get outside. Even if it's raining wherever you are, get an umbrella and try and breathe in some fresh air if you're near any fresh air. To me, being out in nature is calming for my body and my mind. And I think that is so important as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're lucky to be in California for that.
Oh my gosh, are we not? The weather's been spectacular, at least in our neck of the woods, right? Close to the beach. We're very fortunate where we all live. And I know you and I are practically neighbors. So thank you so much, Dr. Nina Shapiro. Please look her up on her website and pick up her books, pre-order the book for the kids, and get back to me and let me know what you think, if you had a favorite chapter. So everybody, thank you for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live with Dr. Nina Shapiro. I appreciate you taking the time. And look us up on all social media platforms as a video on Facebook and YouTube and IGTV, and just about all audio platforms. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.